Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you. We are very blessed to have the congressman that we do, but we'll all go through that a little bit more throughout the program. I do want to take a minute real quick to thank the sponsors. We had a number of people that donated to help make this event possible. You'll see them, they're listed up here. We've got a friend of the conservative movement is no other than 1170 KFAQ. Do we appreciate them? Yes, we do. KFAQ is, if it weren't for them, there's a lot of information that many of us might not get if it weren't for KFAQ and Pat Campbell. And I want to thank you, Pat, for your service to our community. We also have Heritage Action, who has a booth in the back, and I would encourage you to get some information from them. We've got Freedom Works, who's got some stuff in the back. I'd encourage you to get information from them. Yes. These are two great organizations that help us as activists know where our congressmen stand on the key votes that are important to America, not just Oklahoma, but to America. And Jim, of course, does exceedingly well with both of these organizations because he does what he said he was going to do. So please take time. Please take time to thank them for showing up. These guys came, Heritage, Wade came from Dallas, and Noah and Adam came from Washington, D.C. So please take the time to stop by their booth, say hello, and get some information and some materials. Of course, we have Mark Costello, who I just saw in the house. Where are you, Mark? He's our labor commissioner. Can you wave? There you go. He helped us out, as did Expect Marketing, which is Kevin McDougall, and I don't know if he's in the house. There he is. Hey, Kevin. Terry and Holly Gerard, who are activists in Durant, Oklahoma. And absolutely love Jim. Holly's helped Jim with his campaign sometime, and they're just really great activists. They had a family issue. Holly was going to be one of the speakers today, but she's unable to make it, so please keep her family in your prayers. We also have Claude and Donna Tosher, if you would wave your hands. There we go. Elaine Leone, who is probably over there working the booth, and of course Debbie and Scott McKeechin, who are wonderful activists in our community, and they always are eager to help out in these events that we do. And they're also going to be speaking today as well. We do have the free bumper stickers in the back. If you want an I Heart Bridenstine, I'd love to see these all across the state. They don't cost anything, so please feel free to go ahead and grab a few and give some to your friends. Last thing I want to do is I want to ask, how many of you live outside of District 1? Thank you so much for coming and showing your appreciation to our congressman. Many people from the Oklahoma City area, the Bartlesville area, as you guys know, if you're involved in the Republican Party, there are county conventions going on across the state. So many people were unable to make it. But I want to say thank you to everyone that lives outside of District 1 that appreciates our congressman. And yes, Jenny White, Jim Bridenstine is my congressman. We're going to open this with a prayer, and we've already sung the national anthem. Unless the guys want to come up and do it again. Where's the band? Okay, well then we won't do the national anthem again, but we will. Oh, are they coming up? Okay, we're going to. How many of you guys know who Nathan Dahm is? Woo! He's our rock star senator in the state Senate. Well, we are going to have him come up and open in prayer, and then it will be followed by the national anthem. So if you'll please stand for the prayer and remain standing for the national anthem.
Thank you, Rhonda. Please bow in prayer with me. Heavenly Father, we come to you now. We thank you for the opportunity, the freedoms that we have in this nation, in which we can gather together like we are today. We know that your word says that Paul was exhorting to Timothy that, first of all, prayers, supplications, intercessions, and giving of thanks be given for all men, for kings, and for all who are in authority. We know your word also says in Proverbs 29:2 that when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. And while we do take time to lift up those leaders as our president, our governor, and other people in leadership positions to pray that they would actually come to salvation, to have a personal relationship with you, our main focus today for this event is that giving of thanks. Giving of thanks and rejoicing for someone who you have raised up into a position of authority, for raising up Congressman Bridenstine as a voice in the wilderness, a voice of boldness, a voice of righteousness. We thank you that you have raised him up, that you are giving him that boldness to stay strong, to represent us, and most importantly, to represent you, to be an example and a light, to be a witness for your kingdom, for the gospel to continue to go forth. We thank you that you are providing him with divine protection, that angels go before him, they surround him, that no evil can befall him, that you are continually being with him, that you are giving him that boldness, that you are placing your words in his mouth so that he can continue to boldly stand and proclaim righteousness in this land. We thank you for raising him up. We ask that you would help us to support him, and we just give thanks for him today. We also, above all else, though, we thank you for the salvation that we have through your Son, Jesus Christ. We thank you for giving him as an example of sacrifice and service to others. We ask and we believe that all men would come to know Jesus as Lord and Savior. But we thank you for that sacrifice. We thank you for giving up of your Son, Jesus. We thank you for Jesus being that willing sacrifice. And we thank you also for raising up godly men and women in positions of leadership in this land so that your kingdom can continue to go forth upon this earth. We pray for all these things and we thank you for them in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the rampart we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting.
Thank you. I did forget two sponsors. This is Joseph God and I'm saying God? Glad. And, okay, sometimes he might think he's God, but it's Glad. I'm teasing you. Okay, Joseph Glad and Guitars Gone Wild, and we're going to hear from them again a little bit later. So I want to give them a big round of applause for coming out and giving of their time. And then, of course, Tulsa 912. I'd be kind of remiss not to mention our organization. But so those are the sponsors that we have, and there's a lot of places that you can stop back by there and visit it before you leave, but I want to say thank you so much for giving of your time on a Saturday to come and say thank you to Congressman Bridenstine. And at this time, I'm going to turn the program over to Mr. Pat Campbell with 1170 KFAQ.
Thank you. It's great to see everybody out here today to honor Jim Bridenstine. Before I get started here, I want to thank Nathan Dahm for giving a great invocation, opening prayer. Nathan Dahm is an up-and-coming rock star within the Republican Party. In fact, when Jim Bridenstine ascends to the U.S. Senate, look at him shaking his head down there. No. When Jim goes into the U.S. Senate, I think Nathan Dahm would make an excellent candidate for District 1 in the United States Congress. And I don't know how many of you got an opportunity to see Nathan when he was on CNN with Piers Morgan before his program ended. But when I heard he was going to go on, I was very, very nervous because Piers, well, you know what Piers Morgan is like. And it just made me so Oklahoma proud to see him go there and school this limey on our Constitution and what the Second Amendment means and what the Founding Fathers intended. Oh, before I introduce the mayor, and the mayor is going to come up here and speak in a moment, many of you are probably wondering, well, where's Eddie, Pat's co-host, Eddie Huff? Well, Eddie couldn't be here today. He asked me to send his apologies. Apparently, he's emceeing the Appreciation Day for Mark Wayne Mullen. And then after that, he's got to go to a John Boehner fundraiser. So he can't be with us today, but he's here in spirit. He's here in spirit. Please, somebody tweet that out so Eddie knows I said that. I promised him I was going to get him. All right, without further ado, I want to bring aboard Mayor Dewey Bartlett. I'm a big fan of Dewey's. We don't always agree on everything, but this man has been a breath of fresh air. He has spared us another 4 years of Kathy Taylor. For that, and a couple of things, too, and this is not to pat the radio station on the back because we are nothing without you, but the reality is that without you, the KFAQ listeners, and Dewey's acknowledged this on air, without that radio station, without you mobilizing, going out there and supporting him, Kathy Taylor would be mayor of the city again, and it's you, people that are here today, that stood in her way and said, no mas, no more, no more. So thank you for everything that you've done. And Rhonda Valamont Smith and the 912 Project and Charlie Biggs and the Beacon, they stood up against the machine. So thank you for all you've done. I like Dewey. I consider Dewey to be a friend. He's just a good guy. Like I said, we don't always agree on things. He is fiercely loyal. I love that. I dig that. And he's got Jim Bridenstine's back, and Jim Bridenstine has his back. So let's give it up for Mayor Dewey Bartlett.
Oh. Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, boy, that was a surprise. Well, thank you. I'd say that doesn't happen very often. Well, I tell you what, I certainly couldn't agree more with Pat. People in this audience are why I have the honor of being mayor of this great city of Tulsa, Oklahoma. But I want to tell you who really led that effort, Jim Bridenstine. We were to part in the campaign when we needed to get out to the rest of the Republicans, and we're having a little bit of a difficult time, and unannounced, Jim Bridenstine bought some airtime on the radio, made his own radio ad, and talked about it's a good time to support Dewey Bartlett to be reelected as mayor of this great city. And things turned in a positive way. So once again, Congressman, thank you, my friend. Thank you. I also believe very strongly what Pat had said about Jim Bridenstine. He's a true conservative. He's true to his word. He's true to his family. He's true to his city. And most importantly, he's true to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Not too long after I was reelected, he called me and said, why don't you come up to Washington, D.C. As you know, the Environmental Protection Agency has a bit of a habit of overreaching and overregulating this great country. And without people like Congressman Bridenstine standing in the way, if they are successful, this country will cease to exist in the way that we know and love it. He asked me to come to Washington, D.C. to appear in a committee that he was the chairman of, I believe, subcommittee, and said, I want to hear from the mayor of the city of Tulsa about what it means when the EPA overregulates our city. And I told them. And they got to hear exactly what hurts this community and this country, but it's the environmental regulations, the environmental movement that has gone way astray from their original mission, which is simply to have a relatively clean environment, but not to stand in the way of business opportunities. Congressman Bridenstine believes very sincerely to his soul about states' rights, about we in Tulsa, Oklahoma have the ability to make our own decisions, and we don't have to be told how we are supposed to act and what we're supposed to do. So I just want to ask you just a couple of pretty simple questions. Do you think that we would really have a chance of reining in the overreach of the Internal Revenue Service if Jim Bridenstine wasn't there? Of course not. You think we'd have a chance of somebody standing up against the EPA and their overregulation of this business community and of this city? Of course not. Do you think we'd have a chance of the conservative movement and the conservative decisions really being heard? Of course not. We owe a tremendous debt of gratitude for Jim Bridenstine, but we also owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to his family, because they're standing up there with him. I can assure you that the family is always the group that is probably those that have the most influence on whether or not a person is able to spend their time representing their community. And without their support, without their undying loyalty and their understanding, because so many times Dad isn't home. Dad isn't there to help the kids learn how to ride the bike the first time. Dad isn't home to buck them up a little bit when they have a little problem trying to get to first base. But Mom is there, and the kids are there, and they're behind our congressman. I want to tell you how much I appreciate my friendship, my very true friendship with this gentleman. He's a vet, and he's a U.S. citizen, and he is our congressman from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Thank God for Jim Bridenstine.
Thank you, Mayor Bartlett. Next, we want to bring up Rhonda Valamont Smith. Let me say a few words about Rhonda and the 912 project. This lady, along with many of the other ladies that go down to the state capitol with her on a regular basis, they have single-handedly, well, with a lot of hands actually, transformed politics in this state. I can't thank Rhonda. If it wasn't for her group, people like Jenny White from Rope that's here, or as I like to call her, Glenn Beck's girl now. So, if it wasn't for these guys, we would have Obamacare in Oklahoma. If it wasn't for the 912 Project, we would have Common Core in Oklahoma. If it wasn't for these people, we'd have Kathy Taylor as our mayor. It's an ugly world without the 912 Project. These ladies are selfless, they're tireless, they're constantly digging, doing the research that a lot of us don't have the time to do, and they're really changing the way politics is played in this state, and they're changing it for the better. And you've seen some of the people that have gravitated toward Rhonda and the 912 Project. And it started early on with Randy Brogdon, and I gotta give Randy a shout out. I know he's not here today because he's at another function, but without Randy Brogdon, there wouldn't be a Jim Bridenstine. Randy blazed the trail, and but you see the people that she's surrounded herself, people that have gravitated towards the 912 Project. Congressman Jim Bridenstine, he realized how important they were, the significance of this group. Nathan Dahm, who's here, I could go through a whole litany of elected officials, the mayor who just spoke a moment ago. They know that, in the past, when 912 Project first got started, it used to be they would have to go seek out the politicians. Now, the politicians pick up the phone and say, I need to talk to Rhonda, or I need to talk to Jenny, or I need to talk to somebody else from the group. They understand what players they are on the state and national scene now. So with that said, Rhonda Valamont Smith.
Wow. I guess I should have written something, huh? I'm just going to be real brief because I've gotten notice that we're running a little bit behind on time. I do want to just let you know how this event came about and how I met Jim Bridenstine. As Pat said, before Jim even decided to run, he contacted me and we sat down in Panera and we spoke for about an hour and a half. And, I asked him some pretty hard questions and I got some pretty amazing answers. And I tried to convince him to run for state senate instead of for Congress. And I'm glad that he didn't listen to me. Just this one time, Jim. Just this one time. But, he came through. Tulsa 912 partners with a number of different organizations. An American Majority, when they had a presence here in Oklahoma, we did campaign training. And he and his team came in, and I believe you did it twice, didn't you? In about 3 or 4 years, we trained over 120 people to work or to run for office or to work in a campaign. So Jim is one of those that went through that training, and but it wasn't the training necessarily that did it for him. It was his hard work and his tenacity, and the people that stood behind him that believed in him. And when he was on the campaign trail the first time, he promised that he would not vote for John Boehner. And I bet he probably wishes that his last name didn't start with a B. But he was the very first person to stand up against the speaker. And you made us so proud, Jim. We knew we weren't going to win that one. But you did what you said you were going to do, and we appreciate it. But I want everybody to know that this event isn't just about the speaker vote, and it's not about the second speaker vote. This event did come about following that because I know the hard work and dedication that Congressman Bridenstine put in to trying to get the necessary numbers this second go-round. But it's because of his concern for the children at Fort Sill. It's because of the many votes and the many times that he's taken the hard stand and gone against leadership or gone against the way that the other congressional districts in the state of Oklahoma have gone. And he always makes us proud. Now, that doesn't mean we always agree. So let me say that there are times that we don't agree, but we can agree to disagree, and he's still my congressman, he's still my friend. But leading up to the second time back in January when the vote for speaker came up, of course, in November, the congressman said he was going to vote for the speaker. And of course, I didn't really like that, but I think at that time I told you, if you're going to do it, then you need to yell at the loudest so that everybody hears you. So, and then when I knew that it was going down, that he was working to get the numbers, you could hear the tiredness in his voice. I know he stayed up for 48 hours working his tail off to get the numbers that were necessary. And when it didn't go down, just like many of you, I watched it on C-SPAN, and when it didn't go down, like a mother that's been watching her child fight this really hard battle, my heart broke, because I knew that he was going to face some pretty tough stuff for doing what he did. And I called Gabe, and I'm like, when does he come home? Because I want to meet him at the airport with signs. I want to tell him how proud we are, because, you know, we send him out there to do the hard work, and he does it. But you know where he gets the boldness to do it? He gets that boldness from us. And from us telling him how much we love him and how much we appreciate him. And how much we recognize that the job that he does is a very difficult job. So what we decided then was we would do a thank you at a rally of appreciation, and found out when his next period of time he was going to be in for a break, and it was the week of February 16th. Well, the 14th, that last Saturday, was Valentine's Day, and I know I wasn't going to get you away from your sweethearts on Valentine's Day, so that's how we picked this day. And I want to thank you so much for helping to spread the word about this event, for helping to make this event possible, for coming out and showing a great man how much we appreciate him for the hard work he does. And we want to say thank you to Michelle and the kids, because we recognize it is not an easy task for you to have to stay home and raise children while your husband is going to Washington, D.C. and getting beat up. So thank you to the Bridenstine family. We love you and we appreciate you.
All right, next we've got, I think it's a 1-minute video. This is vintage Jim Bridenstine. This is part of the reason we love him and admire him the way we do. This is I believe, a 1-minute floor speech where he's addressing the gentleman I refer to as the Pope of Islam, Barack Obama.
Mr. Speaker, the President's Justice Department sold weapons to narco-terrorists south of our border who killed one of our finest. The President's State Department lied about Benghazi with false information provided by the White House. The President's Attorney General authorized spying on a Fox News journalist and his family for reporting on a North Korean nuclear test. The President's Justice Department confiscated phone records of the Associated Press because they reported on a thwarted terrorist attack. The President's Treasury Department uses the IRS to target political opposition. The President's Health and Human Services Secretary pressures the insurance companies she is supposed to regulate to promote Obamacare, which is the same law she uses to force citizens to pay for abortion-inducing drugs against their religious liberties. Mr. Speaker, the President's dishonesty, incompetence, vengefulness, and lack of moral compass lead many to suggest that he is not fit to lead. The only problem is that his vice president is equally unfit and even more embarrassing.
That was beautiful. In fact, Glenn Beck would refer to that as conservative porn. It's that good. I mean, I could listen to that kind of stuff and Ted Cruz all night long, you know? All right, let's see here. Yes. All right, we want to bring on Noah Wall from Freedom Works. If you listen to the program this week, we were fortunate enough to get Matt Kibbe on the program. We wanted to bring him here, but unfortunately he had some other events lined up. So he sent Noah. Noah is the director of grassroots at Freedom Works. He joins Freedom Works with no more than 7 years of experience fighting the GOP establishment and liberal Democrats on the federal, state, and local levels. He began his career in politics interning for Congressman Bill Solly and worked on Solly's 08 campaign in Idaho as a grassroots and communications staffer. To date, Noah remains the only campaign staffer in known history to organize yard sales to benefit his candidate. So with that said, Noah Wall.
All right, thank you, sir. It's great to be here today, and I want to thank Rhonda for really this outstanding event. You know, we are here today because we have really incredible congressman here that we're here to honor. We all know Congressman Bridenstine's a reliable defender of the Constitution. We all know that. We all know he's led the fight to rein in the EPA. We all know that he's sponsored numerous bills to promote domestic energy production. We know he's a reliable defender of education freedom, healthcare freedom, lower taxes, and civil liberties. Many of you know that Congressman Bridenstine has a near-perfect voting record with Freedom Works, Heritage Action, and others. But that's also not entirely why we're here. We're here because Congressman Bridenstine's the rarest of breeds in Washington. He is one of the proud few in Washington. He was the first member of Congress to publicly announce his opposition to Boehner's reelection. We are here, in fact, because Congressman Bridenstine cares more about his oath of office and more about the grassroots he represents than he cares about Washington's special interests. He cares more about principles than he does about the establishment and the twisted games that they play in Washington, D.C. We're here because Congressman Bridenstine is a true grassroots hero. Make no mistake about that. And we as conservatives need to support and defend our heroes. No matter what Washington tries to punish conservatives for being conservatives, just remember, Congressman Bridenstine, we have your back. And thank you for having our back in Washington. I'm here today on behalf of the 6.9 million members of Freedom Works around the country who thank Congressman Bridenstine for having their back. It's not just, this is a vote of national importance. This is something that we remember and that we really, truly appreciate as conservatives. Freedom Works is an organization that connects the grassroots with what's going on in Washington, and we try to make it as easy as possible for everyone to get involved and for everyone to really have a voice and a say in Washington. And without people like Congressman Bridenstine on Congress, we would be in a lot worse shape than we are today. And it's only because of Congressman Bridenstine and the very few in Washington who are willing to stand up for what they got elected to do. It's really only because of them that we have quite a bit of hope to be able to change things in Washington, D.C. I really hope that we can talk to you guys, after this event. We have a booth at the back. Really hope that you guys can sign up and really join the team here so that we can continue to help Congressman Bridenstine and really make sure that we're able to grow the liberty movement in Washington, D.C. So thank you guys, and it's really awesome being here. Thank you all for all you do.
By the way, guess who just rolled in? Randy Brogdon, over here. Randy, you weren't here a little bit earlier, but I gave you a shout out. I said that without you, there couldn't be a Jim Bridenstine. You really blazed the path for people like Jim, for people like Nathan Dahm, and for those to come. We're so grateful for you, for your service in the state Senate. I wish I could be calling you Governor Brogdon or Senator Brogdon, but we appreciate all that you do, and hopefully you're going to play a pivotal role in forming the GOP here in the state of Oklahoma in the years to come. All right, next we've got Wade Miller, who is going to present an award to Congressman Bridenstine. When he was asked to provide a short bio for today's event, he sent Rhonda the following text: Joseph Wade Miller, handsome genius. Wade Miller served in the United States Marine Corps and is an infantry combat veteran with multiple deployments, including Iraq and the Horn of Africa. After completing his military service, Wade enrolled at the University of Texas at Dallas and majored in political science. While attending university, Wade served as a Bill Archer Fellow and as an intern for the president of the Heritage Foundation at that time. After completing his Heritage Foundation internship, he went to the American Enterprise Institute Summer Institute. He has since worked for the Heritage Action as the South Central Regional Coordinator. Would you please welcome Wade Miller? Thank you, sir. Yep.
Thank you. I have now proven that I'm not handsome, and in a few minutes you'll see I'm also not a genius. Thank you for having me. Thank you for putting this event on, especially to Rhonda, who I consider a close personal friend. I'm not going to have any asks for you today as an organization, except for get involved. Join a Tea Party, join a Republican group. If you're doing those things, you're helping Heritage Action advance conservative principles. But enough about that. I want to talk about Representative Bridenstine very briefly here. And so we focus on accountability. What legislation is being voted on? Is it good or bad, and why? Or why not? And so I spend most of my days reading a lot of articles, analysis, internal Heritage Foundation research and analysis, figuring out, is this legislation good or bad, and how should members be voting on it? And so often I look at pieces of legislation, I think to myself, how is it possible that Republicans could be supporting this? Set aside strategy. Strategy is important, and we certainly take strategy into consideration, but how can Republicans vote for or vote against pieces of legislation? It drives me crazy sometimes thinking, especially as a Marine who wants to be on the offensive all the time, thinking that our own party will so often support such bad pieces of legislation. And it's easy for me to come to this conclusion because I just get to sit in my office or at home and read this stuff, and it's an up or down easy answer for me. When I sit back and I think about it, it's very clear why. Because it's really hard to do the right thing. I don't have lobbyists coming into my home or into my office saying, hey, if you vote for this, we're going to throw our support. All of our organization's support behind you. We're going to give you campaign financing. I don't have party leadership coming into my office yelling at me, telling me if we don't do this, that we might not use our party apparatus to assist you in future elections. I don't have to face incumbents running against me. It's really easy for me to want other people to do the right thing. I have the easy job. What is really hard is what Representative Bridenstine does. He faces the fire every single day. It is hard. And when I see him doing the right thing so often, And no one's perfect. I'm not perfect. He's not perfect. We'll all make mistakes. But when I see someone like Representative Bridenstine doing the right thing so often, the only conclusion I can come to is that you either enjoy pain, and I don't think that Representative Bridenstine enjoys pain, or that you really care about this country, and you care about the direction that it's going, and you care about doing the right thing regardless of the consequences. And every day, I am encouraged to keep doing what I'm doing, because I know that there's people like Representative Bridenstine out there doing that. And I'll tell you, I see that, they brought their kids today. What their kids they probably think that their dad is normal. What they can't possibly know is that their dad is extraordinary. And eventually they'll come to know that. And also their mother, for carrying 50% of that weight load while Representative Bridenstine is out there doing the bidding of the conservative movement and really leading the charge in the fight. So with that, if you will come up here, Representative Bridenstine, if you could come up here, we're going to give you an award. Now, before you leave, if you'll give it back to me, I'll put it in bubble wrap so it doesn't break. We have a scorecard. We rank every single member of Congress. Only 11 members out of 435 scored above 90%. This is one of those members of Congress. And so on behalf of, and like everything at the Heritage Foundation and Heritage Action, even our awards are conservative in size and scope. But this is our Sentinel Award for members who score above a 90%. And on behalf of Heritage Action, I'd like to say thank you very much for everything that you've done, and I appreciate it. Yeah. And yes, please.
People are taking pictures.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And I will conclude by saying that the best way we can help him is to continue to support him in every single possible way we can. We have legislation coming down the pike that the establishment forces would really like to cram it through, and the only people that are going to stand in the way of that are conservatives and fighters like Representative Bridenstine. So thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much, Representative Bridenstine and your entire family. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, our next speaker I'm excited to introduce. In fact, a quick story about how I came to know her. There is a friend I have, his name's Simon Conway. He's a radio talk show host in Des Moines, Iowa on WHO, which is a 50,000-watt blowtorch. And if you want to run for president in Iowa, you've got to go through his studio and be properly vetted. Anyways, to make a long story short, he is originally from the UK. I met him when I was living in Florida. At that time, he was getting out of the real estate business and he wanted to be a radio talk show host. And he was told time and time again, because you've got a British accent, you just can't do it. I took him under my wing. I mentored him. He has become a fabulous talk show host. In fact, you've probably heard him sit in for a couple of nationally syndicated guys. And I just love it when you prove your critics wrong. Anyway, to make a long story short, he sends me a YouTube video of this crazy young conservative girl with pink hair. And I'm watching, and you're looking around, you can see her, she's up here. And I'm listening to her, I'm looking at her, and I'm listening to her, and I'm loving everything that's coming out of her mouth. And, as we look around at the audience here, even with talk radio and with the 912 Project, we have to bring that next generation in. That's why I'm excited about people like Nathan Dahm, and people like Ellie Mae that I'm going to introduce here in a minute. This lady is a rock star on YouTube. She's a young conservative writer and a blogger from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Currently lives here in Tulsa. In fact, her mom's sitting in the front row. She's got a YouTube channel where she's known for her videos titled, or the video titled, Top 10 Reasons Why I'm Not a Democrat. So, growing up with her parents on opposite ends of the political spectrum, she had the chance to learn about each side. Thanks to her mom, she saw that conservatism was the best and in line with her faith and was simply, as she likes to say, common sense. Before becoming sober at the age of 21, she struggled with drug addiction. In fact, this is a great lady for me to have on the program to talk about why legalizing marijuana, probably not the best thing we should be doing at this point. So she became sober at the age of 21. She struggled with the drug addiction. During that time in her life, she saw many destructive lifestyles that are fueled by liberalism. And after getting sober, those experiences were a huge contributor to her conservative activism. She loves Jesus, she enjoys talk radio, and she wants to help influence others her age to join the fight to preserve our liberty. Will you please welcome Ellie Mae?
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Okay. America is at a crossroads. We all know this. In Washington, we have radical anti-liberty leftists, and then we have Republicans who are literally just Republicans because they have an R by their name. Rhinos, if you will. So we have this situation where rhinos are kind of just roaming around, and D.C. is their watering hole. They're drinking, they're schmoozing, they're socializing, but occasionally a lion will appear, and the rhinos naturally scatter in fear. Well, you know who that lion is? It's Congressman Bridenstine. Yes, we have a lion in Bridenstine, a lion who calls out the liars. And when he's around, every rhino and donkey better watch out because he's not there to mess around. He is there to stand up for us and our liberty and to defend the Constitution. So, with that said, I came up with the top 5 reasons why Jim Bridenstine is the best congressman in Washington. Number 5, we all know about the mess that is Obamacare. It's hurting all of us in one way or another, but Jim Bridenstine is to the rescue, and he has been committed to defunding and repealing that disastrous catastrophe. Number 4. Remember when he went to Fort Sill to see the illegal immigrants and was denied access? Wasn't that just insane? Well, eventually he did get a tour, but he brought needed attention to the lack of transparency that was promised by this administration. If I remember right, Bridenstine said, "What are they trying to hide?" Not only that, but he has been a straight shooter when it comes to immigration, so that is pretty awesome. At number 3, we have the epic 1-minute rant that we saw on the House floor where he destroyed the Obama administration with a cool, calm, and collected voice that put burning coals on more than just a few heads. My favorite line was when he said the president's dishonesty, incompetence, vengefulness, and lack of moral compass lead many to suggest that he is not fit to lead. Boom. Coming in at number 2 is when he was one who led the effort to vote Boehner out as Speaker. Yes, like I said, Bridenstine is a lion at the watering hole where the rhinos are a-drinking. And finally, the number 1 reason Jim Bridenstine is the best congressman in Washington is because he stands for liberty, conservative values, and for us, and actually backs himself up with his votes, like voting against the omnibus and voting no on raising the debt ceiling. He actually keeps his campaign promises. How unbelievably refreshing. We need more people like Bridenstine to lead this great nation and to preserve our liberty, to defend the Constitution. Like a lion, there is a lot at stake, and Congressman Bridenstine recognizes and shares our concerns. Truly, we are so blessed to have such a godly man who stands up for us, and we thank you.
Before I introduce the next speaker, I want to remember to give a little shout out. Eric Zellner's here. Eric, where are you? Wave to me. He's around here somewhere. Eric Zellner. Okay. I've got to acknowledge Eric and his brother, Dr. Z, you know, the eye doctor, as well as Dr. Kate, my chiropractor. It was pretty interesting when Jim ran the first time, he needed backers. And the Zellner brothers got together with some doctors that were pretty disenchanted with John Sullivan, and they were instrumental in really getting this guy through the primary and the general election. But the Zellner brothers played a big role, so let's give a shout out to Eric. And by the way, Eric, tell Dr. Z to open that checkbook real wide when this guy runs for the U.S. Senate. All right, next, Brian O'Hara. He's a senior field representative for Congressman Bridenstine. He's a graduate of Belhaven College. He has a background in business and management. In 2011, Brian was elected as Jenks City Councilman from Ward 4. He supported Congressman Jim Bridenstine in his 2012 primary and joined his team as a senior field representative in 2013. Brian, come on up.
My wife got a little nervous because she said, "Do you have any notes?" So I figured I'd write a few on this card. It's one of those things where I have the privilege and honor to be a part of this team. A lot of you see every day in the news. We see every day as we go through the process. So before we get going, what we'd like to do as a team, we want to thank the real person, the real congressperson, the person behind Congressman Bridenstine, Michelle. Throughout the last 2.5 years, we have had the honor and privilege of serving this congressman. And we've done so because we believe in him. Right now, I'm going to announce the people who work for him, people who were successful, very successful in their own kind. But they chose to serve the congressman and, more importantly, serve you. It started with Gabe Sherman, who is our district director. Gabe is an incredible young man, and he has to deal with some older people, so he does a great job at that. We have Sandy Minardi and Dr. Kathy LaFortune, who handle our casework. They're the ones you call. They're the ones who every single day have to deal with constituents on a one-on-one basis, helping them, getting them through the difficult times. We have Eric Zellner, Dr. Zellner, and Commander Joe Newhouse, who are with us today. Both of those gentlemen do an awesome job when it comes to serving the veterans, something that is so important. We have Samantha Jones, who really keeps us all together. She's the one, yeah, she deserves. She does such a great job in making sure that every single day, all of the things that we need, we have. And now we have Emily Helms, who is also doing casework. And then we have what I consider to be the premier social media person, I'm going to tell you, in the country. Here's a young man who has won awards in Congress. They didn't want him to. They tried to do everything in their power not to have him win. But Matt Ryden is just a rock star, and he deserves such praise. I'd be amiss if my job is to go visit the councils, to go visit state leaders, and we have 3 of them with us today. We already know that Senator Dom. We have Representative Brumbaugh with us today, Representative Strom, and Representative Walker. Let's give them a big hand. These guys are very conservative, awesome. When I met with the congressman 4 years ago, for me it was about character. He said all the right things. He said the things I needed him to say. He said he supported term limits. He said he supported the fair tax. He said he supported limited government. And he said he supported the states' rights. All of those were things that I wanted to hear. But more importantly, I wanted to hear that he was going to do what he said he was going to do. I was a successful businessman. I was working as a senior vice president for a company. And I knew at that moment that I had a man that I could support. a man who exemplified character. You see, we have politicians who will say one thing, when they get elected, they do something entirely different. For me, as I go out into the community, it's so important that I don't have to worry about what was said yesterday, what may be said today, and what might be said tomorrow. I know when I go out and talk to the constituents of this great district that it's going to be the same message every time, because he is a man of character above all. I will also add, a couple of nights ago, the congressman spoke about, he was asked a question about a movie. What movie best represents his time in Congress? And he mentioned 12 Angry Men. I don't know what made him think of that to begin with, but I'm sure there are a lot more than 12 angry men in the House. But he said there was one man, and we know by watching the movie, any of us that are old enough to have seen it, we know that there was one man who knew that this guy was innocent. It was one voice amongst many, amongst the other 11, and the other 11 were going to convict him. This one man said, whoa, wait a minute. This is an innocent man. And he spent the rest of the time convincing and taking time out and saying, this is an innocent man, until eventually all the other 11 saw. So when you hear people tell you that one voice does not matter, that we should all play the game, I'll tell you that there are Democrats who play the game. There are Democrats who walk blindly behind a president. There are men and women who will do whatever the president says. There is no one that stood up when we had soldiers dying in Benghazi. There is not a Democrat that said, Mr. President, I don't think this is a good idea. But we did have Congressman Bridenstine. And for me, that is paramount to why I work for him. You see, the people that I said, all of whom had great jobs on the public sector, all of us could have made significant more. All of us chose to work for Congressman Bridenstine because we believe in him. I'll tell you, you only see what you see in the news. What you don't see is the time he struggles with the decisions he has to make. These are not easy decisions. They don't come up and all of a sudden he says, I'm going to do it this way. He thinks, but more importantly, he prays about every single decision he makes. And I'm going to tell you right now, some of those decisions are not easy. As Rhonda said, sometimes there are people who disagree with him. But at the end of the day, he knows that he's made a decision because he's prayed about it, because he believes it's the right thing to do. He doesn't silence our voices either. He asks our opinion because we're out in the field. But we know that when we go out into the field, when we talk to constituents of this great district, we know that he has made that decision with a lot of thought. It is not something he does for political gain. He never wants to be elected because of a decision. So I tell you today, you have elected a man who you can be very proud of. You've also elected a man that everyone in our office considers a friend. I would rather have supported a man on the far right than someone who is far wrong. Thank you, Congressman.
You know, real quick, as a follow-up to Brian's comment about the prayer, I do a weekly lunch with listeners on KFAQ. We go to Bluestone Steakhouse and Seafood. And a couple of weeks ago, I had a guy there from Claremore. He's a postal inspector out there. And he had gone to Washington, D.C., and he shared his story of going to Jim Bridenstine's office. And the man was actually moved to tears when he was telling us his story at lunch. But he mentioned he had gone to see Jim about a particular issue, but before he left, Jim asked him, he says, will you pray with me? And the guy was just overcome with tears, sharing his story about the congressman, soon to be senator, getting down on bended knee and praying with a constituent. He said to see that humility, that humbling not only himself before a constituent, but more importantly, before God from a congressman, restored his faith in this country, our Constitution, and the fact that we can actually take this back. We can win this one. It's not going to be easy, but we can do it because that's the kind of guy we got. Next, we want to bring up Dan Snow. Dan is a 23-year Air Force active duty veteran. He is serving his 13th year as Air Force Junior ROTC instructor at Union High School. The Union Junior ROTC was the only high school unit to host the Vietnam Traveling Memorial Wall. You may recall that. They hosted it back in 2011 as part of the largest event to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attack. So with that said, Dan, please come on up.
I'm going to take us into a whole different way of making my remarks. If you could kind of close your eyes and let me take you back to another February. This February is in a place a long, long way away, the Republic of Korea in 1951. Corporal Pat Mills crouched cold and wet, shivering in the bottom of a muddy Korean ditch. Beside him, a radio barked the message that he and the members of his squad had been praying would never come. Take the hill. With a heavy sigh, he passed the word to his men to move out. Then when his men were ready, he stood and raised a pale bluish hand to the bitter wind and gave the signal to move. Then with quiet determination, he led his men out of the safety and security of that tiny muddy ditch slowly towards an insignificant Korean hill known only by the number 180. Suddenly, the hillside came alive with automatic weapons fire. Instantly, Corporal Mills found himself the center of a firestorm as 27 separate machine gun bullets grabbed his body in a fiery, coming from at least 3 different directions, grabbed his frozen body. The intensity of the crossfire shook his helpless body like a child would a rag doll. Time stood still, and milliseconds were like hours as he fought to free himself from death's sadistic grasp. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. And the god of war tossed him away, torn, battered, and bleeding, back into the cold, dark depths of yet another muddy Korean ditch. A couple of days ago, Joe Newhouse asked me to speak as a veteran and represent veterans at this event. He wanted to know what a veteran's perspective was on why Jim Bridenstine and other veterans should serve in Congress, and why I'm proud to have Jim serve to represent us today. I think the best way I can answer that is if I finish telling you the story about Corporal Mills and his men on that hillside in Korea. I'm very happy to inform you that by the grace of God and the skill of U.S. Army medics and doctors at different MASH units and hospitals in Korea, Okinawa, and Hawaii, Corporal Mills survived his wounds. Among the decorations earned for his time in Korea and his actions on that February day include the Purple Heart and the Silver Star. After spending 2 years in Army hospitals learning to walk again, he returned home. Though declared 100% disabled from his wounds, he returned to help his father run the family dairy. In time, he married and raised 6 children, the most beautiful of which is my lovely wife, Janet. Now, each of those children, all 6 of them, are carrying on the legacy of Corporal Mills and those soldiers on that Korean hill today. Each one of them was raised with a strong love of this country, a tireless work ethic, and an incredible optimistic view of life that allows them to take on any challenge that life throws at them day to day. I don't tell you this story to glorify my father-in-law as some forgotten hero, but to make a simple point. What he did in the war and what he did after the war is extraordinary only in the fact that it is commonplace in my community, the veteran community. That's who we are. That's just what we do. We go off and fight our nation's wars, and we do it to the best of our ability, to the best of our training. Then we come home, And like the greatest generation before us and every generation of veterans before and after, we go back to work. We raise our families. We go to jobs every morning in every possible career field. We open businesses that employ others and inspire others to set goals and set greater goals and do things and take their lives to new and higher levels. That can-do attitude and that commitment to some very basic core values inspire others, veterans and non-veterans alike, to work hard in the service of their communities and their families and, in fact, this nation. Serving in our nation's armed forces is, in fact, a life-changing experience. It gives you a sense of honor, purpose, and a sense of fraternity and brotherhood that's not found on a college campus or a factory floor. It has been said that for those who have defended it, freedom has a different flavor and value the protected may never know and unfortunately may never understand. That's exactly why we need fellow veterans like Jim Bridenstine in Congress. He shares our values and he speaks our language. He understands the issues in a way that only other veterans can understand. We need more veterans like to join Jim in Congress and in public service at all levels, because all of you know this, the real truth behind the words I'm about to say. You've heard them before and you know. It is the veteran, not the reporter, that gives us freedom of speech. It is the veteran, not the preacher, who gives us the freedom of religion. And it is the veteran, not the community organizer, who gives us the right to assemble and protest. And ultimately, it is the veteran who salutes the flag, who serves under the flag, and whose casket will be draped in that flag, that, yes, reluctantly, gives the protester the right to burn that flag. Let's continue to support Jim and other veterans who are willing to take on Congress to serve this land. I'd like to finish with a short poem, if you don't mind, that I believe sums up why veterans like Jim and Jim need to continue doing what they're doing. I wrote it back in 2008 when we first decided to host the wall at Union. It's called The Military Man. I know you didn't know who stood beside you in the stands as you talked throughout the anthem being played by the band. You joked and laughed and cursed, waiting for the game to start. I stood silently beside you with my hand upon my heart. You claim people of every culture are deserving of respect. Why is my culture the one you seem so willing to reject? I come from a culture woven in the fabric of this great land. I make no excuses for who I am. I'm a military man. Beside me stand warriors from every race, creed, color, and religion. We're united by a way of life that is duty-bound and honor-driven. We don't dwell on what makes us different or what sets us apart. We see the compassion in the human soul and the power in a warrior's heart. As you stood beside me, you had no way to know. There was no uniform, no medals. I wore civilian clothes. I live my life by a code that you may never understand. It's duty, honor, country. I'm a military man. One granddad was in Normandy, another at Bataan. My wife's dad was in Korea, and my daddy served in Nam. I did my time in Kuwait. Now I have a daughter in Iraq. I close my eyes each night and pray that God will bring her back. When I listen to the anthem and I watch "Oh Glory in the Sun," I remember every funeral and every comrade one by one, at whose graveside this flag was folded in a proud and honorable way, and to whom the flag was given as this anthem proudly played. Our sons and daughters protect your freedoms every day. Remember that when you see "Oh Glory" and you hear that anthem play. Duty, honor, country. That code is our greatest gift. You see, we don't just wave the flag. We're the threads it's woven with. Thank you.
All right, before I bring up the next speaker, I just noticed a coworker of mine walked in here, and it's not Eddie Huff. Many of you are aware that KFAQ We just got a new employee on air, and I'm so excited about this. I'm talking about Tammy Marler. Tammy, where are you? She's here. Many of you know her from her TV days. There she is at the back table with FreedomWorks. So excited to have her on board. She's our news director. She's going to be my executive producer, and she is also our morning news anchor, and she is a major upgrade to KFAQ. In fact, Eddie calls her part of our beautification program. So it's great to see her here. Let's bring up the next speaker. It's Adam Brandon. Now, Adam currently serves as the Executive Vice President of FreedomWorks, a nonprofit organization headquartered in Washington, D.C., that mobilizes grassroots activists nationwide to fight for less government, lower taxes, and more freedom. Brandon currently focuses on directing priorities between each department and concentrates his efforts to match up the institution's goals with the resources available. As a result of his oversight in each department, as well as the direction of each department's priorities, Brandon is able to ensure that each staff member is provided the resources needed for FreedomWorks to effectively accomplish their mission and restore liberty within each state. With that said, please welcome Adam Brandon.
I believe that bio was from actually a staff document internally explaining what everybody does. And it wasn't exactly my resume, but that was pretty thorough, so I appreciate that. It's fun being here in Oklahoma. This is the second time I've been here, and it's a little bit more friendly this time. The first time I was here, I was with a colleague, and we're at the airport. He's like, hey, I need your favor to do something real quick. And I heard his favor. I was like, I don't think that's a good idea. But sure enough, we did it. And he's from Texas and thought it was a really good idea to go in front of the Oklahoma Stadium and put his hook 'em horn sign up. Cars stopped, doors opened, people are yelling at us, and I'm like, hey, don't shoot, I'm from Ohio. Like, this is not a fight for me. So that was my first experience here in the state. So I only have a few minutes here, and I wanted to, there's a common theme going on here today, which is the pressures in Washington. And I've never had a congressman actually confirm it, although I've actually seen some of these documents before. When you get elected, it's almost like a menu. If you want to be on this committee, you have to raise this amount of money. And it goes all the way. So at the top, you've got like financial services and things like that, where you raise all this money. And at the bottom is like the postal service, which is like $50. But what that shows me is that when you actually get to Washington, from the first few minutes when you get there, there is tremendous pressure for you to forget about everything you did to get elected and go with the team. And it's kind of like the mafia, right? If you play ball with them, they'll take care of you. With that other threat, that stick behind, if you don't play ball with them, all of this power, all of this ability to raise money, you're on the outside. So that's why most of the time, actually almost all of the time, when congressmen get to Washington, they, as we say it, they drink backsliders wine, and there they go. But every once in a while, and I've noticed in the last several years, we've had several congressmen who've gotten there, and they've actually done what they said they would do. And Congressman Bridenstine is one of those guys. And so I know as he's sitting over there, he's probably looking at all of this, and from the little bit I know about the man, this is probably a little uncomfortable for him, getting all this praise. And because my understanding is what really motivates him is not getting cheered on by you guys necessarily, but just doing the right thing. And that is invaluable, and I thank you guys for all the hard work you did to send the country a man like this. So I want to... There was a great story from the speaker fight, and I saved the clip. It was from the Hill magazine, an internal magazine, and it was a congressman by the name of Steve Scalise who said a quote about the speaker fight He has never been lobbied like this before. And what he was referring to was the sheer amount of phone calls that we calculate was probably somewhere between 25 and 30,000 phone calls that rained upon the House of Representatives over a 2-day period. These guys couldn't get a call out. The amount of pressure that they felt to do the right thing was amazing. And I think what you're seeing is this is a change in Washington that's starting to happen because you had a few courageous people who stood up first, like your representative. You got them really on notice now. One thing before I just say a couple other points, I just want to, poor Noah back there brought 70 pounds worth of shirts and things like that. On your way out today, make sure you see Noah and make sure you pick up your shirt so he doesn't have to repack all these bags and send them home. But a couple quick points about Congressman Bridenstine. One thing that cheers my heart is when he said the reason that he voted against the Speaker was the Cromnibus, which shows to me that is everything encapsulated in what is wrong with Washington right now. While we're all trying to spend time with our families over Christmas, let's take every bad thing we can and shove it in a bag and vote for it. And hey, you don't even have to read it, just vote for it. And all is going to be cool. And our fiscal insolvency just gets further kicked down the road. And eventually, some people in Washington have to stand up and say, hey, we just actually can't do this anymore. Margaret Thatcher said the problem with socialism, sooner or later, you run out of other people's money. And we are quickly running out of other people's money. So thank you very much for being a lifetime. You can't agree with someone 100% of the time, but you're a lifetime 98% on the Freedom Works scorecard. A perfect score in the last Congress, 2014, a co-sponsor of the REINS Act, education freedom, health care freedom, civil liberties, shrinking government. These are all things that you can look at your own congressman as a champion. And what I'd like to close with is is something I heard last night at a dinner, and the person's in this room. But we were talking, and it was getting a little emotional, why we do what we do and all of that. And she said to me, you do all this work so you could send people to Washington to make the hard choices. And how disappointing it is when they don't do that. And she said, if nothing else, and I just got a little chill because it's really, if nothing else, what Congressman Bridenstine is doing is giving us all hope. Amen. To keep going, that these problems can be fixed. So thank you very much.
All right, next we want to bring up Debbie and Scott McEachin. They've known each other for 40 years. They've been married for 37. They have been proud to support Jim Bridenstine since the day they met him, and they've got a very special award to present to him today. So with that said, Debbie and Scott, come on up.
You knew we had to, right? It's our distinct pleasure to present this award to Jim. As you have seen, it's a spine, a backbone, a rare commodity in Washington, D.C. The Congressional Spine Award goes to the member of Congress who has proven that they will do what they promised to do when they campaigned. You would think that keeping one's promises would be the easiest thing to do. Why would you lie to the people back home?
Apparently, being true to your word requires some traits that only a very few elected officials possess. Number one, it requires courage and faith. Cicero once said, "A man of courage is also full of faith."
We asked Jim for a favorite scripture, and he responded with 2 Corinthians 12, 9, 10. And he said unto me, "My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then am I strong.
Number 2, a sense of perspective and humility.
Our nation may not be perfect, but it can make a claim available to no other. In the name of the rights of all, it was built from the first to belong to its people and not to their rulers. Dr. Larry Arnn, Hillsdale College.
Number 3, an understanding of our nation's basic principles.
We are a nation that has a government, not the other way around. And this makes us special among the nations of the earth. Our government has no power except that granted it by the people. It is time to check and reverse the growth of government, which shows signs of having grown beyond the consent of the governed. Ronald Reagan.
And number 4, a realistic optimism in the future of our country.
Let us renew our determination, our courage, and our strength, and let us renew our faith and our hope. Again, Ronald Reagan.
I think that we can agree that Jim embodies all of these traits.
We are proud to call Jim Bridenstine our representative and to give him this award.
All right, I believe we've got another brief video from the Tulsa 912 project, please. Real quick, by the way, the spine award, Jim doesn't need a spine. He's got one. Maybe you could lend that to some of the fellow members from the Oklahoma delegation. They could borrow that from time to time, okay? I want to say a couple of words about Congressman Bridenstine before we bring him up here and have the band, Joseph Glaude and the Guitars Gone Wild play one of his favorite songs. I have been a radio talk show host for 22 years. When I started, I was one of the younger guys in the country. That's why I'm so jazzed about Ella May. I see a little bit of me in her. I like that spunk. And as a talk show host, I've really been blessed. I've been allowed to interview a lot of famous people, and I've talked to every kind of politician you could imagine. Local level, state, national, the good, the bad, and yes, the ugly. And I got to be honest with you, Jim Bridenstine is unlike anything else I've ever encountered. And I mean that sincerely. If you listen to my program, you know I don't blow smoke up people's, skirts. Let me tell you about what makes Jim exceptional. Here is a guy, and I remember meeting him the first time, and Eric Zellner. And I looked at this guy's resume, and I'm there like, man, this is a guy who could do just about anything he wanted to. He's got a very impressive resume. I mean, Fortune 500 companies would gobble this guy up, pay him a lot more than he's making in D.C. He'd be able to stay home with his wife and his kids. It's like, why are you doing this? And Jim has had this conversation with me privately. I've shared this with some people. I think I've shared it on air, but I've shared it with people at lunch on our weekly KFAQ lunch deal. This guy is not in it for the money. He's not in it to be a career politician. Jim is exceptional. In fact, there was a movie out a couple of years ago, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And that's what Jim is, extraordinary. And what drives him is the fact that he believes he's being called by God at this time to serve our country, because we're in a perilous state. This is a guy who totally gets the economic state that this country's in, the total lack of leadership. You know, you see what's going on overseas with ISIS right now. He gets it. He understands it. And he sees this as a vocation. It's a word you don't hear very often anymore. Not as a career, not as a job, but as a vocation. He believes that he has been genuinely called by God. And he sacrificed a lot for us. Here's a guy who would love to be home, you know, with his beautiful family, his young family, spending time with his kids. But he has sacrificed, and his family has sacrificed a lot of that so that he could do what is right for us. And I am proud that Jim Bridenstine is my congressman. I am proud that I voted for him. I believe in Jim Bridenstine. I believe in him. And in a world where we've become so jaded, we're just so used to being lied to by elected officials. It is so refreshing. It is so restorative to have a man like this who says what he means and does what he tells you he's going to do when he goes to Washington, D.C. This guy's walking around with a target on his back for us. In fact, I joked on air. I said, "Do you have a food tester?" I said, "Because you probably should get one at this point." But we are really blessed. And you know, here in Oklahoma, it's so great that we can really say what Jim is all about. And that call from God, that still means something here. In other parts of the country, it doesn't. In other parts of the country, they'd laugh at you. They think you're nuts. But here it still means something, as it should. So, Jim, I want to, on behalf of everybody here today, just thank you. And although this is a glorious occasion, the day that's really going to put a smile on my face is when I get to call you Senator Bridenstine.